Welcome back to the Messy Reformation. My name's Jason Rice, and I'm the Associate Pastor at Bethel CRC and Chaplain at Central Wisconsin Christian in Waupun, Wisconsin. My co-host is Willie Cronky. He's a member at Pease CRC in Pease, Minnesota. We're just a couple of guys who love the Christian Reformed Church and want to see Reformation happen in our denomination. But we realize that whenever Reformation happens in the history of the church, things get messy. And after the last couple of synods, and as we move into this rebuilding phase of the Reformation, things continue to be messy in the Christian Reformed Church. So we're taking the opportunity to have conversations with pastors and leaders throughout the Christian Reformed Church to find out what's going on in our denomination, but also to talk about what Reformation and rebuilding might look like. If you haven't already, take a moment to click subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. We're dropping episodes every single Sunday evening. It's also important for you to know that you are our marketing plan. We rely on you to spread the word about what we're doing at the Messy Reformation. We rely on you to share our content, and we also rely on you to give us 5-star reviews and provide good feedback for this podcast. You can also support us financially on Patreon or Substack. All the money raised is used to build the platform of the Messy Reformation. With all that said, we're going to get to this week's episode, which is part 2 of our conversation with Jim Hollendoner.
Millennials and then Gen Zs and Gen Alphas, all of those, lineage doesn't matter anymore, right? That's and so that assumption that they're going, no, but you can go be a part of a mega church online. And you can stay in your boxers. You know, the commitment to church, far less. This church was 1,500 people with 3 staff members. We're 300, 350, and we have 5. That doesn't make sense in my math head, but I'm math dumb. So, you know, it's what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have some conversations to have later this week with a few of my students. I had them, some of my seniors, fill out some spiritual gifts inventories last week. It was part of the curriculum I was given.
We love that here. We love that here.
And like 5 of the guys ended up getting pastor as their spiritual gift.
Really?
And they were all like, no,
I don't want to be broke.
Right. Yeah. And I'm like, I need to like tap on that a little bit more and just be like, okay, so what is that? Because they were all like, yeah, that's not something I'm going to do. And I'm like, so I think you're right. But I also am like, okay, I wonder what's behind on that. I mean, I think in some ways.
But it's mega church pastors falling publicly. The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast, your Bill Hybels scandals. When pastor and scandal is the 3rd most searched thing on Google in a statistic I just made up right now, that is not a good thing. Why in the world would anyone want to go over there? You know, when, you know, why would anyone want to live in a glass house? Back in the day, there was honor in it, right? Back in the day, it was a calling. There was that, I think that external calling has gotten a lot muddier, you know, where you have people that go, yeah, I see that in you, or there is not a snowball chance in Hades. I see that call in you right now. And not out of anything vindictive, but just it's not there. Sometimes we have to call time of death, right? Sometimes we have to say that, like at Munster, one of our philosophies is the right butts on the right seats on the right bus. You know, and so we have integrated the spiritual gifts inventory into our assimilation. And we're going to be turning into, before you can be considered for elder or deacon, you have to take it. Right. And you have to sit down with our spiritual kind of discipleship team to work through all of that, because you'll get the people that fake it till they make it. And the CRC is known for, hey, you got a pulse. You could be elder or deacon. I'm sorry. I think that's unbiblical. I don't think you can read that in the scriptures. Well, the young guys are going to be deacons and the old guys are going to be elders. No, I don't see that in the Bible either. You know, we're in a sermon series right now, Earth, Wind, and Fire, the start of the church. It's the first 8 chapters. And, you know, when they had to cast the lots for Judas's seat, right, his spot, what did they do? They didn't look at his seminary background. They didn't look at how much he gave. They didn't look at, he runs a plumbing company, so he can be a good deacon or a good elder because he deals with beep all the time. You know, you can't do all of that. What did they say? they walked with Jesus, they saw Jesus, and they talk about his resurrection. Put the hat in the ring, right? We've seen these giftings in people. And, I think the CRC and a lot of our Reformed churches, when it comes to the leaders of the church, they have done a disservice by not actually going a cut deeper to go, are you gifted in this? Man, he's a great elder, but he hates people. What? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And I wonder, even to connect this, I wonder if some of the lack of desire in young men to enter the ministry comes from our lowering the bar at the elder standard. Like they're looking up to elders and they're like, oh, I don't know, these guys aren't what, right? They're just kind of thrown in there. They're just basically business managers. And so I can do that somewhere. I can manage a business somewhere else and make a lot more money. And so I'll go do that instead.
Yeah. And again, we don't, I don't know about you. I haven't taken a vow of poverty to become a pastor, right? You can make a good living if you're good at it, right? And you actually know a little bit of how to negotiate and do all of those things, because I love our denomination, but they don't help that conversation with the minister's compensation survey. It is getting a little better. It used to be terrible. It used to be really good before I was even in the CRC. But, the biggest thing is, the right gifts. Put the right gifts in the room. The body of Christ is a beautiful thing when it all works together. Paul, if we all were ears, where's the knees? If we were all toes, where are the fingers? And I think because of a lot of our churches are struggling. I don't know what Classis Wisconsin is like, but Classis Chicago South, 5 churches will be leaving. They're going to get a lot smaller. But there's only 2 big churches, that would be probably worshiping over 150 in their classes. Here at Ileana, we have 16 now. We just disaffiliated one in the spring for not being around. Like I said, 3 to 5 will probably close in the next 5 to 7 years. But we only have maybe 3 or 4 that are worshiping. But yet we still have a high concentration. We did a study 2 years ago in our classes at Route 41 and 30 in Cherville, Indiana. There's a place called Burger House, which just closed. But we actually we drew a 7.5 mile radius around that location and said, let's see if we can find Reform-based churches, right? So we did CRC, RCA, Kingdom Network, because that's a big one around us. The ARC, right? Because that's coming up around here. We did the URC. We didn't do the PRs because they don't count us, so we didn't count them. We also have the Reformed Baptists, non-denominational Reformed. You won't go to the same church in a year because there's more than 52. And, so a bunch of us sat with that, like, is that a good thing? And then I challenge, I go, can we name 10 people we know in our life that aren't saved? Yeah. Well, then I think we got a job to do. But for some reason, we don't like to play in the sandbox together. And that's a whole nother conversation and all the things, but you go, there's a high concentration, but what good is it? I bring up classes consolidation and people want to slash my tires because there's some unhealthy pride in our brick and mortar. I'm sorry, I'm going through the book of Acts right now. In the start of the church, there wasn't brick and mortar. Like they didn't care about that. So, yeah.
So what do you think, what advice do you have for the CRC in handling this pastor shortage? So if we kind of figured out part of the problem, but where do we go from here? Because I think some people would say, well, we're lowering the credits at Calvin Seminary to make it easier to get more people into the ministry, to try to up this thing. So that would be maybe their solution.
So the question then is that quantity over quality? Is that the conversation we want to have? I think we need to do an internal SWOT analysis as a denomination, right? And we need to look at, the things we're doing right, the things we're doing wrong, our opportunities, our threats, or whatever you want to look, whatever acronym you use. I think, now granted, I'm coming from a place where three of our classes, most of the churches are within a 25, 30 mile radius, right? I have friends out in Classes Columbia where they have to fly to their classes meetings. So I know this doesn't always work. But I think, what if we closed a third of our churches in a strategic move to get, so that Classis Ileana was 5 really strong churches that actually had giftings to church plant, that when 2/3 of your churches aren't going, we may not make budget this year. How are they going to think about church planning? How are they going to think about raising up new commission pastors or new interns or seminarians when all they're thinking about is whether or not they're going to keep their doors open? So I think the conversation before how do we get more pastors is how do we church better, right? How do we church more unified? Now, there's going to have its own natural difficulties and whitewater, if you will, having those conversations. How do I know? Because I've tried to bring it up twice in Ileana in the last 3 years, and a lot of the older guys don't like that. And they say, well, you're at a successful church, so why are you telling us what to do? And I said, can you repeat that again in your head and see if you can make sense of it so I don't have to do that for you? Like, we're not a successful church because everybody shows up. There's vision here. We want to work together, right? There's a vision, there's a mission. We don't assume anymore. But we've also made some people call it aggressive. I don't necessarily think it is. But like in our philosophy of ministry, we say we don't want ethnicity in common. We want Christ in common, right? Now, that's also coming from a non-Dutch pastor. So I'm not saying being Dutch is bad, but when the mantra is you ain't Dutch, you ain't much, even in the subcultures of your church, guess who's not going to go there? Non-Dutch people. And when you're in an urban suburban context like we are, where you got Gary and Hammond right across the highway, I can get to Sox Park in 30 minutes. Guess who's not around anymore? Those flights have all gone south of me. It was one thing that attracted me to Munster was the people here have stayed. And I'm going, that's interesting. They didn't leave. They didn't go to Crown Point. They didn't go to Lowell. They didn't go down to where they could buy more land and all that. They stayed here. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I won't say their names on here because I don't know how publicly they've made that, but I've had a couple of pastor buddies who have said that we probably need to have some of the hard conversations about maybe this isn't the best way to, I would say it this way, but like maybe we don't have as much of a pastor shortage, but we have too many churches and we have a lot of unhealthy churches that maybe are hanging on too long, right?
That was Jason Ruiz. That was 4:45 in the afternoon on October 27th, 2025. Dear Lord. That is completely motion seconded and supported by Pastor Jim Hollendoner. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I've heard people saying, and they really do get, and this is coming from me who was known for a long time as being the church revitalization guy, because I think that is really important too.
And now you're the church closer.
But I do think we need to learn how to have some of these hard conversations.
Absolutely.
And those are really hard conversations.
Because now you're talking heritage, lineage. People are going to take that personally. They're going to have to deal with failure. What does ecclesiastical failure look like? But when you're living in the heyday, I remember sitting with two pastors. Neither one are in the CRC anymore. And one of the churches aren't in the CRC anymore. The other one won't because they'll close in the next year. And that pastor's no longer there. They asked me to come to be the objective third party for a lunch. And I said, absolutely, because they were talking about, they were in the same town. They had split at one point, and they were talking about coming back. Right? That's what the conversation was. They wanted to see if there was any room for that. And went to a lunch. One of those lunches we have like the 3-course meals. It was a very nice lunch. And after 2 hours of the conversation, what it got to was, our pipe organ is better than yours. And we're all on one level. And so you don't have to worry about stairs or elevators. I remember I got up. I just put the bill in front of both of them and said, you guys can fight who's paying for this because you just wasted 2 hours of my time. Because at no point was it talking about vision or mission or reaching the lost. They were ending with pipe organs and level ground. And I was going, yeah, that's not going to happen. It's just not in the cards. And you want to talk about, how we can partner together. There's a lot of different ministry models coming out of Chicago right now where it's the same building, but 3 different churches. That one church meets at 9, one's at noon, one's at 3. Their leaderships meet once a month just to kind of come together with what they have in common. Right. And they're all, I would say, true churches, according to the Belgian Confession. There might be different denominations, but, they actually are working together. So the overhead is shared.
Mm-hmm.
How would that look in Class Siciliana? I'd probably get shot. Because there's just too much ecclesiastical pride, and not in a good way, of us being able to sit down and have those conversations. And all I asked 3 years ago with a guy with two other pastors was to sit down asking for a classes contracta, but not even an official classes contracta, after Christmas, after the New Year, to come together. We'd put on a nice breakfast and a nice lunch and just do a SWOT analysis of the classes. So they didn't even have to talk about their own church, but the classes. And we were going to lead two discussions, that we're going to have a nice lunch and come to kind of a wrap it up and just see if there's any next steps. I called 4, one other guy called 4, one other guy called 4. I had a maybe, one had all no's, one had, who are you guys to put this on? And it was like, all right.
You know, Jim, I have a seemingly random question here. There's a lot of stuff in play right now. You're mentioning a lot of ecclesiastical dynamics, ministerial dynamics here. So if you were going to counsel someone who is going into ministry, pastoral ministry in the CRC, given the cultures that you've just described very intimately, what would your words be for someone like that?
Oh, that's a great question. So I did this actually a little bit. We have the church we actually broke off of at Munster in 1870 was RCA, and now they're PCA. They were part of the 5 ones that went PCA 12 years ago. And they just called a new pastor. Great guy. And him and I met for lunch. He comes out of Omaha, Nebraska, and has no understanding of Ileana, of Dutch world and all of that kind of stuff. And we talked about the Dutch Chicago book, and I actually gave him my copy. He was two chapters in and bought his own copy of it. But one of the things I told him, I said, you need to take a year and learn. You need to learn not only about your church context, but about the context around you. So that was a big one. And then the power of presence, which again, he's been pastoring for 20 years like I have, and so he knew some of that stuff. But the big thing was to make it like contextual learning. That is one of the key things I would tell a young seminarian. It's what I tell my 2 seminarians on staff is, if you're not every week learning something new about your context, something new about your people, then you're really, you're wasting a lot of time, because guys going into the ministry, if, as well as I do, it doesn't equate 1-to-1 what you can pull from seminary, you bring in day one. You got to learn, right? You got to learn. You got to work on earning that trust, earning the right to be heard. Earning the right to speak. And, gone are the domine days. Jason, does anyone call you domine outside of a joke?
Not outside of a joke.
Yeah, exactly. I have one, they're 95 and 94. I'm domine and first lady, right? And my wife is first lady, and she can't stand it, but she goes, that's just what they do. That's it, right? Yeah. And it's, so going in saying, thus saith the domine isn't a thing anymore. It's learning, it's contextualizing. Honestly, it's where's this church hurt itself over the last 10 years, 20 years, however old the church is. What schisms has this church gone through? Because, you and I, all 3 of us, we're defined by the emotional and physical scars that we have. They all tell a story, right? Churches are the same way because, and I'll just use Dutch Chicago as kind of the view of that. I don't know if you guys have ever read the Dutch Chicago book. There are literally chapters in there about Roseland and Inglewood, of having 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th CRC, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th RCA. Literally, like if you go to 1st RCA, you don't talk to people at 3rd CRC. You only date the girls at 4th CRC. What in the John Calvin, Jim Crow laws are we going? What are we doing here culturally? And how in the world are we getting people to understand that this is the Church of Christ? So a lot of it is learning, right? Unless you're going to start a brand new church plant, which again, you can't plant without understanding contextualization and where you're being planted. You got to spend a year learning,
Yeah. And even a year is a good start.
Sure.
But it takes even longer, right? Mm-hmm. But that was some of the best advice I got from some seasoned pastors. They said, because I'm a guy, I like to come in and shake things up and do things. And and they're like, you're going to be tempted to make a bunch of changes. You're going to be tempted to think, and I get pretty quick reads on people. They're like, you're going to be tempted to think you got a good read on the church. You don't. So don't do anything for the first year. Just sit there and kind of marinate in it. And I'm so thankful for that because, Yeah, I learned a lot. And even, 7 years later, things are still coming up. We were like, oh, I did not I knew this thing had happened in the life of the church, but I didn't realize how that impacted all of these other things as well.
When you can't figure out the sacred cow landmines, you're going to blow your legs off, right? You're going to, because you're going to step on something and go, what was that reaction? Only to find out it was there the entire time. You just didn't see it. You didn't learn it. You didn't ask the right questions. And that's where talking and sitting down with the older kids of faith at this church, 70s, 80s, 90s, we have like 10 in their 90s, talking to them about that. That is such a, it's a threefer, right? Because it's a home visit. You're not going to be a young pastor that just cares about the young people, and you're going to learn about the history. Learning from the past helps you go forward in the future.
Yeah. Well, and then that also, especially with the older members of your church, sitting down and saying, hey, could you tell me about what life has been like in this church? Not only do you learn a lot, but you build a lot of relational credibility
1,000%.
with them.
Yeah.
And that's really now in the non-domine era, the authority we have is relational authority for the most part.
If you don't have the relational clout, there's not a whole lot you're going to do. I don't think.
Yeah.
I think relational, that power of presence is huge. Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. And so you got to work pretty hard to build that up in
takes
whatever
longer
ways
than
you
a
can.
year,
Yeah.
That's because we had the guy before me, Jeff Boltice. He went in year 6 for a routine wisdom teeth surgery, and they nicked a nerve, and the guy's been in a dark room ever since. The guy can't talk more than 10 minutes at a time because of pain. So this church went through, just awful. He now writes for the online Today, I believe. Yeah, I think he does a lot of the online media. But this church in 155 years, they've gone through lean times, feast, famine, right? They're mid 2000s. They thought they were going to close. This legacy church, they thought they were going to close. And it wasn't until they paused, started listening and looking outside their walls. They didn't realize it, but they were putting some pretty early stage plans down of becoming a community church. They didn't know what they were doing in that. They wouldn't have said that. They just said that we need to be able to reach the community. And so they took some pretty intentional steps, like what we would call probably aggressive, but they had to do it out of last resort. Very
Jim, out of all the years you've been a minister now, I just want to ask, what are some of the most notable mistakes that you've made and looked back and learned from?
First, right off the bat, thinking I had people following me and I didn't. Assuming that one conversation was enough, that I was that good of a salesman, to think people were bought into vision, only to go 50 yards down going, oh, I'm by myself. There is no buy-in. Learning that, the early adopters, mid adopters, late adopters, and never adopters, you got to bring them too, but you're going to kind of drag them. That's been huge. I would say that's looking back now, going on 20 years. That was a big one. I will go back to my very first youth ministry, Church of the Master, non-denominational church. It was my last youth group night, because I was taking another call to be a teaching pastor at a church south of where that was. And I had to tell the kids, and I was bawling. I was nervous. I had thrown up. It was because I invested in these kids. I love these kids, blah, 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 blah. And I remember I called my Dave Sanders, he was a Young Life guy, military helicopter pilot. And I just call him and go, why am I struggling with this? He goes, Jim, because you love them and this is hard. He goes, this will get easier. This is your first one. It's your maiden voyage of saying goodbye. And I said, okay. He goes, just remember 3 things. And I've said this to now interns and seminaries I've worked with. He goes, and same thing, just the way he said. He goes, just remember, Jesus loves these kids more than you ever have. Jesus is the one that died for these kids, not you. And if you leave and this youth group falls apart, then it's 100% your fault. Those were the 3 things he gave me. And I'm going from not crying anymore, trying to feel good, to wailing, because now he just freaked me out. But it's so true. The minute we make ministry about me, or you make ministry about you, the minute you're gone, what are you going to do? There's no other Willie. There's no other Jason. There's no other Jim. So that's been another one. But then the same guy, he said, he always gave this teaching of, Jim, how do you fly a helicopter? right? It's not like this, like you think of a joystick. You got to hold it open. You got to let you got to let the helicopter sometimes fly itself. So many pastors want to grip and white knuckle everything. Everything has to flow through me. Well, then why do you have a staff? If everything has to flow through you, why do you have elders? Why do you have deacons? Because if you're going to do everything, then you're going to burn out, right? And, we'll see, you'll be done in 6 years, right? Because you can pull all the rabbits out of 3, 4, you can fake it for 2, but then you're done because you'll probably mess up. And I know that that's a sad tale, but, those are 3 that I definitely learned over the years. The church isn't paying you to go for a walk by yourself. The church is paying you to lead people and go on a journey together. Those 3 points of, Jesus, especially being in a church 155 years, like if I leave and this thing shuts down, that's real bad. That's Jim, take that legacy. Like that's I gotta quit, type thing. But then the overgripping, you can't overgrip, and I'm trying to work with that with some of my younger staff right now, because I see them coming in. I have a guy right now at Westminster Seminary, great guy. I love him to death. He's young, he's raw. He needs to be, polished a little bit, but like he's over our worship. He wants to grip that. And I said, understand, you have 3 people on your worship committee that have done worship longer than you've been alive, man. It's okay to learn from them. It's okay to listen to them. It's okay to let them, you stink it right in a liturgy. Guess what? They did that for 30 years in their church. Maybe let them do it. And then you can just oversee it. Like it doesn't all have to flow through you.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. One quick question before we wrap up, because it wouldn't be a messy Reformation episode if we didn't look at the CRC in general. And I don't want to look at the past. I want to just look forward briefly and just think, like, where do you think we need to go now as a denomination? Like looking forward next 5, 10 years, what do you think we need to be thinking about as in the Christian Reformed Church?
So I've said this in some groups that I've been in. We are still that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. We're still in the reaction mode, right? Synod 22, right? I was on study committee 8 in 22, right? Me and a bunch of guys kind of were in that. So that was really where the first line in the sand was drawn on the conservative side to the sexual ethic, right? And then 23, 24, and 25 has been what they've been. We have defined our identity in an identityless ship for 30 years prior to that. This is just me. This is just Jim, who's come in, right? I've come in. I didn't grow up in this. This is how I'm seeing it. The grassroots of 1990 to COVID, right? Where all these grassroots, we get to kind of be whatever we want, which allowed a lot of our churches then to think that they can do whatever they want, right? And we saw that come out in Toronto and in Neyland and over the years, right? Because you lost your identity. There was no bounds to the river. The river became this wide. 22 said, nope, here's the river, right? 23 said, here's how this is where the river's going. 24 said, this is how you get out of the river, whether by we remove you or you have to go yourself. And 25 said, and now you have a timeline for it, right? And that's kind of where we're at. We're not done seeing the canoes that are going to come in and out. That's still going to take a couple of years, right? Because at the end of the day, we got to see if there's still any agendas in those canoes. And the canoes that are still here, what are the agendas? And I think the revitalization, ex-revitalization guy, I think needs to be denominational. I don't necessarily think church planning is the way to go right now. Like I said, I think church consolidation, ministry consolidation needs to be where we're at. We boast we're 945 or whatever the number is. Great. How many of those are worshiping less? How many of those are actually worshiping less than you are allowed to being an organized church? Let's have that conversation first, right? So I think over the next 3 to 5, there needs to be some internal structuring. I think we got to figure out what in the world Resonate's going to be. Is Resonate going to be this healthy appendage to our denomination when it comes to church planning, church revitalization, those kind of things? Or is it going to be a parasitic relationship that is only going to start continuing to pick some things off? I'm not saying that because I believe that organizationally, because I'm organizational psychology guy. I love that. We have to do more than just sell the big denominational building. We have to define the relationship with Canada. I mean, You know as well as I do, Willie, I'm assuming you're married, right?
Yes.
Okay. We all have spouses. If we have this ongoing frustration that's all the way in the back, and it's like, well, we're never going to go to the back room because that's where the frustration is, so we're just going to avoid it, you're always going to live in tension. There's always going to be this tension. CRC Canada, CRC US, right now, the rivers aren't the same. I don't believe they're the same. I really don't. And that's different than just milk in a bag. But understand that I think that conversation is the last remaining identity conversation that we have to have. I've had friends on the pension board, and they have walked that out 15 years. What does that look like? Because the pension is the big thing, one of the big pieces to that. They said it's not going to be that hard to figure out. If we go to I don't know, do you go to a CRC Canada, CRC US? I don't know what the answer is. I have no idea. But that if there's another schism to come, because one thing we've seen in the, 1926, right? We had the schism with the PCA or with the PR church, right? You have the schism with the RCA earlier, in, what was that?
1853 or 57. I can't remember.
1857, right? The schism there, right? There's been these identifying moments in the CRC. 22 to 24 was one of them for us. That identity is not going to settle. That dust's not going to settle for the next 5 years. So I think after you organizationally can structure it to be about vision, mission, now that you have your identity, right? I think that's when you continue to, now we can think of new things. Now we can think of new opportunities. We can look at new ideas and new missions and new, church planning and all of those things. The classes that I'm attached to, so classes Kalamazoo, classes Chicago South, classes Northern Illinois, the church planning is below average at best. It just is. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. The idea of daughtering churches the way they used to do it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't, because you're just taking people that really don't like what's going on and have these non-negotiables that they have that they want to go implement at another church. This is coming from one that schismed off Crown Point when I was there. Who, guess what? Not even in the CRC anymore. They're in the ARC.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thanks. That's good. Gives us a lot of stuff to think about. We are wrapping up here. We always give our guests an opportunity to give some kind of final word to our listeners, and we've got a whole host of them from all different ages and across the U.S. and even some Canadians who are listening. And we actually have a bunch of listeners in Australia and Uganda too, which I don't know.
No way.
All of that, but yeah, we've got some worldwide people who are tuning in fairly regularly.
That's awesome.
But what would be your final words as we close out this episode?
Well, guys, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to come on and just, speak some nonsense or whatever it is, with you guys. And I've had a lot of fun. But what I've been finding is we've been transitioning some vision and mission stuff here. Actually, tonight we're going to vote on as a council a potential start of a 30-year vision. It's something we've been working on over the last 2.5 years. And I'm really excited, but I'm also really nervous to the point where I may throw up again before we have the conversation, because there's a lot somewhat at stake in that. But I reminded the guys that it's all good stuff. And so, we've seen, have we seen growth at Munster? Sure. And the three things I tell my staff in my council and my committees is stay excited, stay humbled, and slightly terrified. And I think that that's an okay place to be. But to the listeners of the Messy Reformation podcast, no matter what is going on, either in the CRC or whatever denomination or church you find yourself, may we always get to a place where we can rejoice in what the Lord is doing. And what Paul says in Philippians, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. And I think that's one of the big things that I've reminded people in the CRC, my family that's in the PCA, like the Lord's at hand. None of us are bigger than him, right? None of us are the sovereign God. None of us have been that. And if we can remain faithful, let's remain faithful, because I think in that faithfulness, the Lord's going to choose to work through us, right? If we're not faithful, then he's not going to. He tells us in his word, he doubles down on it. Jesus does, and so let's stay faithful, but let's have a lot of fun. Let's stay faithful. Let's have a lot of fun. But like you, Jason, I think we need to start having some of those hard conversations too, right? Churching and pastoring from 100 years ago to today is extremely different. And those metrics don't always work the same.
That's all we have for this week. If you want to help us out and support the Messy Reformation, another thing you can do is sign up for our newsletter through Substack. That way you'll get episodes and summaries sent directly into your email inbox. It also gives us the ability to communicate with our audience, which is one of the biggest struggles of a podcast. So head over to the Messy Reformation on Substack and sign up for our newsletter. But until then, don't forget this is Christ's church, and he bought it with his blood. And we've been warned that wolves will come in trying to destroy the flock. So keep a close watch on your life and on your doctrine. Preach the word in season and out of season, and keep fighting the good fight in this messy Reformation.